haven't done a presentation like this for a while where it started with a prayer, so thank you for the prayer. And I'm glad to be here. I was visiting with Dr. Graham, and he suggested that I come and talk with you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing at Accenture. And in particular, he said that it would be good to have the students have a broader understanding of some of the things that business is doing with learning. And I'm going to give a little bit of a snippet. I'll talk more about this later, but my company spends almost $900 million on training every year. And when you think about it, that's almost $1 billion, right? So if you say, is there room for me in instructional design in corporate world? Yeah, there is, absolutely. So let me proceed with just a little bit. Some background, you can kind of read, but in 1987, I was kind of where you are, except I was working on a bachelor's degree. I got my master's from Northwestern. My daughters, I got to introduce my family, right? My wife, Julie, I left BYU single, and I thought that was going to be a problem, but my wife was waiting for me in Chicago. So my oldest daughter, Kristen, served the mission in El Salvador. Mackenzie is currently in Berlin, Germany, and Rebecca keeps us sane at home. She has a little cupcake business that she runs, and she's making 200 cupcakes, I think this evening, for a wedding that's taking place later on in the week. So what I want to do today is I want to really approach three things. First of all is the business context for why does Accenture spend almost $900 million in training. So I'll set a little context as far as why it's important. And then I'm going to focus on a very small part of how we do learning. We could spend hours talking about the different aspects of it, but there's one that I think will give you a nice broad view. And then we've also done some work around making learning stick through some brain research that we've been doing with MIT, as well as looking at a lot of the instructional design models that are out there. So hopefully we'll have a chance to get to that point. So before I delve too far into it, what does Accenture do? And if you look at the website to understand what, or have someone who knows someone who works at Accenture, what do we do?
Technology consulting.
Technology consulting?
I think you do consulting in a variety of different fields, beyond just technology.
Yeah, we do. You're nodding your head.
Well, yeah, I was looking at the website, and the more and more I was looking at it, I was like, I'm curious what he's going to talk about, because it seemed pretty broad.
Yeah.
Like that, I could tell it was technology and consulting and strategy kind of things.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great confusion to start with. Hopefully I'm going to solve that confusion and take some of that away. So, how many of you have stayed at a Marriott hotel? How many of you have used some Unilever products like shampoo? How many of you have shopped at Best Buy? How many of you use either Verizon or AP&T? How many of you have eaten an Oreo cookie? How many of you own a pair of blue jeans? How many of you have mailed something through the postal system? All right. So, sound like random questions, but that's just a sampling of the things that we are involved in. Half of the mail that is delivered throughout the world is delivered through systems that Accenture put in place. We have almost 1,500 people on the ground at Best Buy, helping them, and we have for several years, helping them with their strategies. They try to navigate the very challenging retail world. We've got several people at Facebook. Just go right down the list, and pretty much any company, Levi Strauss, that's why I asked about blue jeans. Mondelez, the company that makes Oreo cookies. And I'm just going to run through these. You can kind of read the little narrative, but you can see some of the savings that we've helped different companies achieve. Marriott, $7 billion. With Time Warner, we digitized their entire film catalog to bring it into the digital age. So if you're watching any film that is a Warner Brothers production, Accenture had their hands in that. We've helped Michelin Tires and Caterpillar Tractor and Unilever. And I just mentioned I have to tell you about this one. This is funny. This picture took 2.5 days to take. And this is actually not a real Oreo cookie. It's a metal cookie. And the reason it took 2.5 days, they had to get the lighting right, and they wanted to get the splash right. So obviously this is photoshopped in, but the rest is all legitimate splash from the milk. And they just had to keep dropping the cookie and cleaning up, dropping it. So a little bit about business context. And to your point, I'm going to try to solve some of the mystery there. We have 5 distinct businesses. And when you look at them, this means that we can go in and help people from the very beginning by helping them think through their strategy. What do they want to become as a company, right? What's their direction? How are they going to survive in the challenging business world? So we can help them work with their strategy, and once we get the strategy figured out, then we can move into consulting, and we can help them figure out how do they actually accomplish that. And then we can help with the technology, with the digital aspects of things. And once we've done that, once the strategy's in place, we've consulted, everything's in place, then there's a lot of back office operations stuff that we run. So we really own the end-to-end for business improvement. And sometimes we'll just play in strategy, or sometimes we'll just play in consulting, or sometimes we'll just play in some of these other spaces. We're in 40 industries, which means we do training in everything from healthcare and electronics to heavy machine equipment and entertainment. 40 different industries. We're in 120 different countries. 89 of the Fortune Global 100 are our customers and have been for many years. So this is an interesting slide because if you put the hat on that you all are working in as far as learning and training, start to think about the complexity of getting people in 40 different industries skilled in these different things so that we can have a great reputation and continue to maintain relationships with these huge, significant companies around the world. The way that we are successful is because we have great talent. We've got incredible people, incredibly smart people. I feel very privileged to work with the bright people I do. I learned so much from them. And we're on a growth trajectory. 385,000 employees now. We're on an easy path to 400,000. Last year we hired 85,000. This year we'll be hiring somewhere around 100,000. Now think about that. That is, what's the BYU population? 30,000. So it's about three plus times the size of BYU. We're hiring. Most in India and the Philippines, but also all around the globe. And our success over the years, our 16 results were just reported, 32.9 billion. And again, going back to the question of why is learning valuable, these are the things that our clients value, right? If we don't have these things, then somebody else gets the business, somebody else gets the work. If we don't have both broad and deep expertise, we need to be able to talk about an industry, but we also need to know how to code things so that they don't break. We need specialized skills. That goes into that depth, right? We need to be able to talk the language of our clients. The other beautiful thing about Accenture is with the 385,000 people we have, we are connected just with tremendous virtual technology. Half of my team is in India. It was January of this last year when I first met them in person. But we felt like family because we all have screen monitors at our homes and we talk with our video cameras on and we do all of those types, kind of like we're doing here, right? And that's the way that we work. So the global network is brilliant because I can connect with anybody around the world who has the expertise that I need to solve a problem. And that's amazing because you've got almost 400,000 people to draw from. And invariably, there's going to be someone who has that expertise to share with you. You can read through the rest, but the main point is something that our chairman and CEO says, that attracting, developing, and inspiring the very best talent in our industry is critical to meeting the evolving needs of our clients and growing our business. Now, there are several things in there, again, from a design standpoint, or from a learning standpoint, should be jumping right off. Attracting and developing, right? Our people have to continue to grow. They can't stop because nobody in the industry is stopping. The very best talent in our industry is critical to meeting the evolving needs. Again, going to the point that things are changing, they're constantly churning. If Best Buy were to open up a store like they did 20 years ago, it would fail, right? They need to be moving, and we need to be moving along with them and helping them to figure out and strategize. All right, so what does this all mean from a learning standpoint? Because talent is so important, And here's that magic number, 841 million, that's an old number, this year's closer to 900 million. When you start looking at the breakdown of what that means, it means every employee gets at least 42 hours of training a year on average. Those in more senior positions will get more. We ran almost 5,000 physical classroom sessions last year. We've got over 100 different places where we run training, so more than 100 learning venues, almost 3,000 virtual sessions, 80 of these things called connected classrooms. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute, and almost 200,000 training days. So let me just pause and get your reactions to what I've shared so far. Any thoughts or comments running through your mind? Please.
So with all this training, do you ever offer training for your clients, or is this all internal for Accenture?
Great question. So I'm an internal guy. All I do is internal training. All of this is internal stuff. Do we offer to clients? Yes. It's a small part of our business. But if you think about the 5 distinct businesses, you know, we will do consulting, and part of that consulting is helping build those skills. We'll also do the operations, and our operations is really where our training arm is. There are some places like, years ago, Avaya University, big technology thing, right? We ran Avaya University, but our name was nowhere associated with it. But we did pretty much all of the course development, and we did all of the logistics. And so we do that for a few companies. But my emphasis is internal.
Couple of questions from
Yeah, please.
distance presenters.
Sure.
Elizabeth wants to know what connectivity software you use.
So, great question, Elizabeth. We use a variety of, we use Adobe Connect for some things, we use Skype for most things. But then we have a whole bunch of other technologies that we use. We've got a very tight relationship with our CIO organization. And so, one of the things I mentioned, I was just over with the Dean of Marriott School of Business. One thing I shared with him that was pretty exciting. We recently experimented with holographic technology. So our CEO was in Paris, and our CHRO was in New York, and we had about 100 of our senior leaders in St. Charles, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. And from the vantage point of the 100 people, it looked like our CEO and our CHRO were on stage. We're using, you know, holographic technology, kind of space age stuff, and they could see the audience, so they could interact with them a little bit that way. Anyway, I wasn't going to get into that, but it's a cool thing. You're quite still. When you say what technology we use pretty much whatever technology is going to help us accomplish what we need. So, any other questions there?
Yes, this one from McCoo.
Yep.
Says you have 385,000 employees and you're hiring 100,000. Are you growing quickly? What's your turnover rate?
Yeah, it depends by region, by geography. In fact, we had a real problem with that for a while over in India. Our attrition rate was about 25%. And so part of that we found, and this is an interesting story, because part of that we found was that there were other companies that were offering better learning solutions. People would go and they'd advance their career by going to another company. So what we did is we did a joint partnership with MIT to create a certificate program that was multiple year. And it's a certificate you get that's both MIT and Accenture. So we had MIT faculty, Accenture faculty. And what we found was that by having that be a lengthier time, that people would get more, they'd enjoy the company more and they'd stay longer. So we managed to get that down. But we have that type of attrition. Then of course we also have some attrition that that's managed attrition, right, where we invite people to leave who aren't a good match. So any other questions or, yeah, please.
Can you tell us just about the regional learning centers, like what those are and how they function?
You bet. Can I save that question? I have a slide on it because I want to set a little context first. When people ask me what's Accenture's learning strategy, I say it's really a bunch of smaller micro strategies. And it all starts with a business alignment strategy. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we have people who go to these the 5 distinct businesses, right, and all of the little sub things. They go and they understand where we want to go as a company. So where do we want to take our strategy practice? Who are the competitors? What skills do we need to compete against them? And then if we know what skills we need and where our future is, then we say, okay, what skills do we have, right? And once we know that, then we know the gap, and we figure out how do we fill the gap, right? And so all of this, all learning strategies, if it's not starting with a business alignment strategy, in the end, it's not gonna make any difference. And then you think about curriculum as far as, well, what's the whole suite of things? I mentioned we're in 40 different industries, right? If we have someone someone who's working at a very senior level with one of our oil and gas clients, needs to understand the industry different than someone who's just getting into the area, maybe just kind of behind the scenes doing. They still need to understand one, but the training is going to be different, right? So for the higher end folks, we might put them into some rich business simulations, like what we were talking about earlier, right? Rich business simulations where we hire some of our former clients to play the role of the executives, right? Because they know our tender spots, they know where we falter. So they, in the role play, right? These are people who know us. So then we get our client teams, our employees, they practice and they get all ready, and then they go in to this simulated environment, they try to sell. Well, that's different training than if you're creating a website, but you still need to understand the industry. So you need to think about what's the full curriculum given different levels of proficiency that are needed, and what's the progression. If you build all of this, and we have 50,000 courses on our learning management system, if you build all of this and you don't communicate out that you have it, again, it's for naught. It's not a wise way of investing. And then our learning delivery strategy, this is where we'll get to your question in a little bit about the regional classrooms. You need a way to deliver the training, and sometimes that's physical, sometimes that's virtual, that can be a variety of things, but you need to have strategy in place. How are you going to use it? What tools are you going to use? How are you going to do it? If you have instructor-led, then you need a faculty strategy. Where am I going to get the faculty? Our internal faculty strategy is that we bring our line experts in. So they're not necessarily good teachers, but they really know their stuff. So we bring them in and try to help them become good facilitators. And so that, you need to be thinking through that. And then of course there's the whole, how do you design, how do you develop, and then how do you evaluate to make sure that you're getting your key outputs. All of that needs to be supported by things like technology, design thinking methods, and then some sort of rich analytics. So I'm going to focus just on the learning delivery strategy part of it. And to do that, let me just play a video for you. If I can get my mouse skills up here. I can see my mouse. There it is. I'm on the wrong screen.
Learning has always been a key driver in Accenture's growth story. Our mission remains the same: to build market-relevant skills and attract and retain the best talent globally. But major pressures are making our current approaches to learning difficult to sustain. Training costs cannot continue to scale as we grow to 400,000 people. Our people's learning time is at a premium. Our local capabilities and bandwidth are inadequate, and our competitors are threatening to match our promise for learning. To meet these challenges, we're revolutionizing learning at Accenture. What will learning look like the Accenture way? Well, as always, we're committed to giving you time away to learn, so you can focus and grow. You'll still have the major regional experiences, meetings of the mind on an international scale. But there'll also be more collaborative local learning experiences that bring the best of the regional experience closer to home. Local, but globally interconnected, bringing faculty to you wherever you are. And there'll be more virtual training, highly interactive and delivered anywhere.
Goodbye, everybody.
And with greater access to world-class content and a culture that supports development, It will now be easier than ever to be learning all the time. There will be easier access to the best on-demand content, a rich pool of internal and external online resources so that you can learn on the go wherever and whenever you like. And there'll also be more opportunities to learn on the job, where you'll gain knowledge and support through apprenticeship learning, coaching, and collaborative learning. Time away to learn, and learning all the time. 2 ways you'll learn at Accenture through a rich variety of experiences.
So this is our learning delivery strategy, and it centers on this time away to learn and learning all the time. And the time away to learn means we're going to take people physically out of their workplace and give them dedicated time to learn. And so it's like for the next 3 days, for the next 2 hours, for the next 3 weeks, depending on how long of a school they're involved in, you are dedicated to learning. And then there's the whole, and that's where we get the regional, the local, and then some of the virtual. And then the learning all the time is the mobile solutions, it's the mentorship and the apprenticeship things, as well as communities. We have a large community of practice infrastructure. And so this helps us to manage what we do with that $900 million, right? We start thinking about, well, what's going to help given a particular person's level in the company, their responsibilities, and where do we invest? Is it a new skill? Is it something that is a hot skill, something that's just developing in the marketplace? In some cases, we need to get training out very quickly in a matter of a couple of weeks. Well, we're not going to be able to put together any sophisticated thing in a couple of weeks, but we can put together, we have some solutions. So this time way to learn and learning all the time has really been a great way for us to be framing it up. I'm going to dive a little bit into a few of these. You were asked earlier about the regional learning centers, and I appreciate the question because it did cue the slide up. So I live in St. Charles, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, and you can see down below that number, that's the number of training days that we do annually at that facility. So we do 70,000 training days in St. Charles. Then we have we just opened up a center in Dublin. We have one in London, Madrid, Kuala Lumpur, and we're currently building one out in Bangalore. The one we had was at about 10,000, but we're actually building out, and that will be at 50,000, so almost what we're doing in St. Charles. So these are facilities where we physically fly people into them, and we run usually multiple day training sessions on a variety of topics. It could be on how to be an effective strategist, right? Or how to be effective at a particular type of consulting. How to do something called issue-based problem solving. There's a variety of things that we teach, and sometimes it's basic presentation skills, or it could be any number of things. So, did you have a specific question, or does that help frame up the answer to that? Okay, please.
I don't know if this question's related, but I'm curious to know if embedded in this learning framework, there's some sort of formal succession planning or leadership development program.
We have multiple leadership development programs, yeah.
Internally for the company?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got several because each of those 5 distinct businesses has their own way that they want to develop leaders.
Right.
And it makes sense because like in our digital practice, we started buying companies to grow our digital practice. So we bought a company called Fjord. Any of you are familiar with Fjord Design? They're now owned by Accenture, but it's a very different culture than what we've been used to. Right? So they've got a very different way of leveraging or managing people for leadership development than the people in strategy. So, please.
This question is about, maybe it's more like curriculum.
Yeah.
I've just been hearing about different organizations that talk about this is what we're going to train people on, and then some others say like, hey, we even want to just give them, it almost seems like random skill, like they'll have like Google will say, hey, let's teach them how to play guitar, or teach them how to do this language. It's kind of like just a smattering of different things. So I'm wondering about, at Accenture, how is it decided like what people are going to learn about, is there some kind of like, is it always directed toward a specific project that they're on, or is it just in general skills, stuff like that?
It's a great question. So we have some skills that we call core skills. And we always have a debate over what are those core skills. And it varies slightly by the groups, but they're like presentation skills or basic communication skills. Everybody needs to be able to do that in business, right? But then there are business skills that are core to a specific, like if you're in the digital practice, there's a set of skills. So you got the foundational core skills, so you've got some if you're in the digital practice, and then you have some that are highly specialized. So a lot of it depends on what you're planning to do with your career, as well as what the company foresees that we need. We're doing some interesting things about trying to forecast the skills that we need in the next 3 to 5 years. We're with a couple of different organizations trying to figure that out. And once we do, then we're going to start to need to skill people up on those things now so that we're ahead of the curve, right? So those types of things we're also considering when we think about what we're doing with curriculum. We want to weave some of those things into the curriculum. There was a question back here, Jason.
So if you're flying someone into this center, and maybe you're going to address this a little bit later, but if you're flying someone in, you're making an investment
Yep.
in their career with Accenture.
Yep.
What kind of decision rules do you apply to say this position or this individual or this type of career justifies that expense of bringing someone in and housing them for a few weeks for a learning experience?
So we have certain schools we call milestone schools. Those are generally the bigger ones, and that's when someone reaches a milestone in their career. And for those, it's just kind of, if you get that promotion, you're going to come and have that experience because you need that to succeed at the next level. So that's one scenario that's kind of automatic. Then there are other ones where the leaders will identify certain people who are going to be working on a particular aspect of the project, and you know that we have training in that. A while back, when I was working on some courses in the insurance industry, there was some new regulations that were coming out, right? And they needed to fly everybody together so they could talk about the implications of those. They wanted to build a personal network. So there's also implications as far as what you're trying to accomplish with that. In some cases, in fact, in a lot of cases, some of the best part of the training is when people get together and make a connection that they can then continue long after. So, all right, other questions, please?
So you mentioned just kind of basic communication skills, things like that. Do you guys develop all your own kind of materials and curriculum for that? Do you ever partner with other organizations like Crucial Conversations or Gallup Strengths Finder or stuff like that?
Yeah, in fact, we have a huge relationship with Gallup on the Strengths Finder. We just completely, this last year, completely changed our whole performance management approach to something we're calling performance achievement, and it's a strengths base based on Gallup. And so now it's a little strange for people who've been doing the traditional performance management process for the last several years, because that typically was, well, you know, how is he doing as compared to how she's doing, and it was kind of this rank and laddering thing. That's all gone. Instead, it's like we take about a 20% look at what they had accomplished and 80% looking forward, and we ask the question, how can we help them to work at their intersection of their passion and their strength, right? So yeah, we do partner with, that's one. Also, some of the, I mentioned we've got 50,000 courses in our learning management system. There are several of those that are Skillsoft courses for some of the foundational things. We tend to focus the things that we create on things that we think are either our secret sauce, right, the things that you can't buy in the marketplace, or something that makes it uniquely Accenture. Those are the things. And often they're the milestone skills I was just mentioning with Jason. So please.
So how much of the learning is self-identified and how much is top-down? How much is the learner choosing?
Yeah, another great question. In fact, that's a challenge because if you've got 50,000 assets in the learning management system, the question is, how do I find what's right for me, right? So we have a recommendation engine that lies behind our learning management system. And there's a couple of different categories. There's one that's mandatory training. So as a global company, there's all sorts of courses we have to take from a legal standpoint. There's several that we want people to take from a cultural standpoint. And before I go over to India, they always have me take some certain manners courses and things so I don't embarrass myself or whatever. And then there's others that are recommendations based on what we know about you. So if we know your career level, and we know what practice you're in, and we know what training you've taken, and we know what the people who are in the next level up have taken, right, then we can say, other people have taken this, and it's kind of like Amazon, right? If you read this, you might like this. So it's a mixture of things. We have that engine behind to provide guidance on that. So, please.
The follow-up question, why should employees engage in informal learning?
Why should they?
What does Accenture do to encourage that in an LMS or something?
So there's a variety of things. One is we actually have a fairly, we've used gamification with our social learning, and we have leaderboards, and we've got, so I'm a 10-time guru in social learning. So I've reached the highest level in social learning because I've written enough blogs and I've commented on enough things and I've responded to people who are, asking questions. And, so we have a pretty big infrastructure that way. The other thing is when people do meet with their supervisors, they're always encouraged to seek out a mentor, right? And to seek out other people that can help them, whether they're physically located together or whether they're in another place. And we also, in our activities that we design in our training, we often design them so that they're social experiences. So we try to create a culture of social. If we go back to the slide about what our clients value the network, right? The global network. So there are a lot of things that we do, everything from weaving it into our courses to having a formalized program. So, any questions on that? Okay. So let me jump to another cool thing that we're working on, connected classrooms. So we've made a significant investment in the last 2 years to create these things called connected classrooms. And it's hard to do justice with a couple of pictures, but let me do a little bit of explaining and hopefully you'll get it. Each of these tables, 6 people, there's a monitor at the end of each one. You can't see the monitor here, it's back there. But monitor at the end of each one. You can see you can do group work on your individual monitor, but then you can hit that button in the middle, and all of a sudden you're sharing with everybody in the room and everybody in another room in another city that's connected. So when we talk about connected classrooms, we're talking about connecting these types of rooms in different cities. So you could have an instructor in New York who's teaching a group that's in Atlanta and Chicago. And then you could have another subject matter expert in Chicago, and they pass it off seamlessly. And what happens when, and then, like I mentioned, the group activities are great because if you're in this group and you want to share, this group in Atlanta, and you want to share with the group in New York, you hit your share button, and all of a sudden there's a little camera that is above the monitor that'll zoom in on you, and you'll be able to talk as if you're in the same room. So what's cool is when we watch people using this, at first they're enamored with the technology, but then at some point that enamoring goes away and they just engage with people that are in a different space. All this stuff is really, super high def. Of course, there's the smart boards that you can actually write on to share across the space. We worked with Steelcase on the design of the rooms and the furniture and things like that. But this gives you an idea. So the rooms have ceiling speakers, they've got high-def video conference cameras, they've got the huddle boards, so a very technologically savvy environment. Now the interesting thing, I mentioned that New York and Atlanta and Chicago, but the interesting thing is we actually have over 80 locations. So we have the regional centers where we bring people together, but then we also have more than 80 of these connected classrooms. And we can actually connect up to 90 at a time. But we found that that's really impractical. In part because time zones, right? That's a problem. Although I was in a training course in St. Charles with my colleagues in Bangalore, India. We had a certain amount of time that overlapped, right? This part here. And then they did some work and then we did some work afterwards. So you can work around it with some design tricks. But this is a significant investment. And these rooms cost us about $100,000 each to stand up. And we're on a path to have 100 of them. All right, let me give you a little feel for what those are about with this video. This mouse keeps falling asleep. There we go.
Connected classrooms are really all about how we can change the way that we deliver content and education to our people without having to pick them up and bring them to facilities and locations. You will find in working through these environments that it will be no different than an experience you would have in front of an instructor, yet you may actually be separated by thousands of miles. You will feel like you're part of a classroom that's really just globally connected via network circuits and cameras.
Their GDN teams are participating along with other teams to have a similar experience as they learn this space, but then also develop the camaraderie where they can stay connected through a community structure and in an ongoing way really evolve together as a group of practitioners.
Kombinace online a klasického učenia je veľmi dobrá, pretože ponúkne nový pohľad, ako pracovať s niekým, kto nie je odtiaľto, ale z inej krajiny a zároveň to zlepší efektivitu a týmovú prácu.
It really is the best example of how we can collaborate across multiple continents. It really shows the power of the one global network that we have here at Accenture.
See the Jeopardy game in the background.
Is all instruction delivered in English?
It is. Well, yes, however, there are some geographies that will adapt certain programs to their local language, but the majority of what we do is all English. Other questions or reactions to that?
Well, kind of follow up to that, do you do language training for your workforce?
So, and we have a business partner for that as well.
So how do you incentivize your employees to continue to progress, to continue to improve, to, because, I've seen lots of people where it just they just flatline, right? And they're just like hanging on, trying to do the bare minimum, getting by.
My tongue-in-cheek answer was we only hire type A's. That's partially true. But we have a culture. We've invested a long time building a culture of learning. And so we tend to attract people who want to grow and continue to evolve in their career and their understanding. And the people who don't will eventually find themselves, working somewhere else.
Is there an assessment piece, and what does that mean?
You talk about individual assessment or assessment of the courses?
Individual assessment of the learners.
For different programs, we do have some assessments that we do for individuals. We don't have any. We tried something in India that didn't work as well as we hoped. We wanted to do a big skills assessment, and so that's a nut we haven't completely cracked at our satisfaction. Because that's a critical piece if we really want to get everything aligned where we're getting the right training to the right people and get rid of more of the rest. But we've experimented with some things we don't have to figure out. As far as course evaluations, we use Kirkpatrick and pretty much follow that model.
So, do you see most big businesses going in this direction with this kind of focus on training, retaining employees for satisfaction, because I think, I mean, and one of the factors of attrition is, oh, I'm not growing, I would like new opportunities, I'd like to put something new on my resume, or I'd like this, or that, the other. Do you see efforts in other fields to try to build a similar infrastructure that you've built, the emphasis on training?
There are some, but there are still a lot of industries where it's not as I mentioned, but a lot of the high-tech companies are where they're just constantly investing because they're trying to attract the best and the brightest and keep them. Because when, you know, if we lose someone who's bright, they go to Google, Facebook, Microsoft.
I noticed on an earlier slide you highlighted design thinking methods and learning analytics. How do those factor into your evaluation and development for different initiatives?
Great question. So we use a lot of design thinking. We actually, there's a group called the Luma Institute out of Pittsburgh. And there are several of us who are Luma certified, and we use a lot of that in the front end analysis, where they use their design thinking methods and to really eliminate some of the bias of what we're being told. Because sometimes the person who's holding the paycheck, right, the sponsor who comes in and says, I have $300,000 and I want to build a course, and this is what I want, we'll take a step back and say, great. And then we'll put him through some design thinking processes, and the answer of what he wanted will often come out different than what he thought. And in the process of doing that, he'll be bought into the new solution. So that's the way we do that. And we do it throughout. We also do a lot of learner interviews. In fact, one of the cool projects I'm working on right now, I'm doing a project I'm calling Extreme Learners. And I'm interviewing a variety of interesting people. I just interviewed a friend of mine his name is Sanjay Sarma, who's the head of digital learning at MIT. We interviewed a finalist in Master Chef Norway. And we've got a Nobel laureate that I'm doing an interview. So what I want to do is I want to find out what are their motivations for learning, what are their habits for learning. Do they consider themselves an extreme learner? A variety of things like that. And what I'm hoping to do is find out what can I learn from that to help our people at Accenture be better learners. One of the interesting things that I'm finding is a pattern in all of these is all of these people have a natural curiosity. And in fact, Sanjay, when I was talking with him, he said that he likes to go really broad, and then he goes as deep as he can until he gets, he was moving his head, he goes, until I get to the core. He goes, I'm not satisfied until I understand the core of something. And he said, once I understand the core, then I'm good. And he does this over and over and over again because he's curious. And then what happens is because he has the breadth as well as the depth, he starts making connections where other people can't make these connections. And so he comes up with brilliant ideas. In fact, one of his responsibilities out at MIT, he reports directly to the president of MIT. And one of his responsibilities is to reimagine education there. And so when we were talking, he said, just imagine, what if we didn't have a course catalog? That's an interesting question. What if you had a university that didn't offer courses? How would you grant degrees? How would you measure progress? I mean, there's all sorts of things, but it's an interesting question. It would probably mean that you're very research-based.
Two questions online.
Yes, please.
One from Jesse, who wants to know about how you ensure necessary foundational technology and bandwidth with such a large gathering.
Yeah, great question. We work with our CIO organization, so that's not mine. We just make sure that they know what our needs are, and they're always wrestling. It's a global company. We have to be, Skype has to work 24/7, right? And Skype with video has to work 24/7. And so when we came to them with the connected classrooms, they said, oh, that's just more video bandwidth, right? So for them, it was just like, okay, we need to add this extra stuff. So that's how we work with them.
And another question here from Dave wants to know about what LMS you use.
Yeah, we're actually currently migrating to something else. We had used SumTotal for years, but it was so customized that people from SumTotal didn't recognize it. So, but we don't use Cornerstone anymore. We do use something called Desire to Learn for some of our blended solutions, kind of a Blackboard-like thing. So, just have a couple of minutes left. Any last questions? Please.
I'm just wondering, what kind of things are you looking for with a group like us? Like, are you looking for research partnerships or new employees, or like what kind of?
I know, part of the reason I was talking with Brother Perry when we were in school is to just have that type of dialogue about what, is there some type of a relationship or not? I'm here primarily to help you understand that there's a big need for learning in business. So, any other agenda that comes off of that would be just fine, but that's not the primary driver.
Got two more questions.
Yeah.
One, what's it like to work in a company with a global family?
It's great. It's very different. When you say global family, I immediately think of my colleagues in India, but then I also have a good friend whose name, oddly enough, is Bruno Mara, not the one you're probably thinking of, from France, of course, Sophia Antipolis, actually, and all over South America. It's great because you start to recognize that we really are connected in a lot of ways. It's not uncommon when I have my team calls to start off celebrating someone who just had a child born, or someone who just got a new certificate for something that they learned, or those types of things. And so you do get that sense of family. When I went over to India, Vandana Gupta, who is one of my employees, was so excited to share with me the temples. So she took me on a tour of about 4 or 5 temples in Delhi, and it was awesome. It was just a great experience, good cultural experience, and it helped us to be connected. So great. Hi.
Yeah. What would you say is the most important skill that you're looking for, or maybe 2 skills that you're looking for when you're hiring people like our students here for jobs?
The number one thing is the ability to learn. If we hire people who don't know how to learn, they don't last with the company very long. And going along with that is the ability to be agile, be able to take on responsibilities that might be a little different than what you thought. I mean, what I'm doing now, even though it's related to what I studied, there's a lot of things that are very different. I didn't study anything about virtual reality, augmented reality, but we're doing some really cool stuff. I didn't study anything about holograms, but we're doing some cool stuff there. So the ability to learn, the ability to be agile, and the ability to give pushback where it's needed. I mentioned the scenario before where the design thinking methods help us to give pushback. Otherwise, what happens is you end up creating training or learning experiences that don't have any impact, and then that's wasted money. I feel that 900 million we spend is a stewardship. And so if we had time, and we don't, I'd review with you the things that we're doing with brain science and instructional design, how we're taking the two and we're doing some real interesting things there, including some original research with MIT, where they put on the EEG cap and all those other things. So I see we're out of time. I want to thank you very much for giving me the stage for a little bit. I hope this was enlightening, and I am going to be around, so if any of you have any other questions, I'm glad to entertain until you wear me out.